Hello and welcome to the first night of the Get Lit Festival. I'm Kate Peterson, Director of Get Lit Programs, a nonprofit housed within Eastern Washington University. Get Lit is a week-long celebration of literature traditionally held in Spokane, Washington. This year, all of our events are virtual and almost all of them are free of charge, and you can find them on our YouTube channel. To learn more about Get Lit, to find this year's schedule of events, or to donate, please click on the link below to visit our website, getlitfestival.org. Now I'd like to hand it over to Claire Walla, Get Lit's Assistant Coordinator.
Thanks, Kate, and thank you everyone for joining us for We the Indigenous, a reading and conversation featuring 4 talented poets and prose writers from our region and beyond. We the Indigenous is a virtual reading series celebrating Indigenous authors from the Pacific Northwest to the Southwest. Get Lit has teamed up with the founder of the series, Navoti, to bring you tonight's star-studded event. Joining us will be Tiffany Midge, Elissa Washuta, Jake Skeets, and Navoti himself. These authors will be reading from their recent award-winning works, and following the readings, DA will lead the group in a short discussion. Let's go ahead and get started with our first reader. Navoti is a member of the Gila River Indian community and a nonfiction writer. His work has appeared in Homology Lit, Spartan, Indian Country Today, Cloudthroat, and elsewhere. He is a Radical Imagination grant recipient from the NDN Collective and was a 2020 City Artist from the City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture. He curates We the Indigenous, a West Coast literary series founded Wellness-ishness, a blog for creative hot messes. He is a STEM B professor at Seattle Colleges. Welcome, DA.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do appreciate this event happening tonight, and I'm really excited to pick the brains of our amazing, talented readers later on in this reading. So with all that said, let me just dive right in. So I'm reading excerpts from my memoir in progress titled One Pima Pilgrim, which chronicles pilgrimages to my tribal motherland through 4 seasons in 2016. My original goal was to write about nature in my homeland, the Gila River Indian community, which is south of Phoenix, Arizona. Yet the land in which I visited across 4 seasons, where my late father took me exploring every weekend in my youth, exposed me to a landscape too full of memories about my alcoholic father. So One Pima Pilgrim is about confronting histories that are deeply connected with land. So this, I'm reading 2 parts. The first is just a quick prologue, and then we'll dive into a chapter. So this prologue is called 2 Pima Pilgrims. If sons and fathers were boys the same age, would they play together? I imagine they would by digging in the backyard in search of something not there, like pirate treasure or a tunnel to China. Or maybe they'd excavate dinosaur bones, which turn out to be thick roots leading them to their boyhood sanctuary, a treehouse heaven high. Fooled by roots threaded under earth, they throw their arms up in the air and agree to count black ants instead. Dots in the hundreds, perhaps thousands, breach their cavernous underworld to tread ours. Ours, if they had the world once more, sons and fathers of similar age. Not the same height, however, as puberty is an awkward mess. And so adolescence is a quick skip ahead because they've outgrown their backyard and have become well-behaved young men, or at least they try to be. Through the heartache each endures of first and second and third rejections, then fourth and fifth loves, with first kisses and 0 notches on their dashboards, if they had wills. They don't grow apart like ordinary buddies. They'd be each other's best man at their respective nuptials, nodding to each other as the commitment to lifelong marriage is promised to their respective mates. The son is betrothed first, probably, as he's usually a skip ahead of his father, who is a bit reserved, cautious, prejudiced. Still, the father falls in line soon enough, or maybe he doesn't, despite the son's guidance. They don't tear apart during the passing of time, which deepens the jealousy of others around them. They are different because they are son and father of the same flawed age, pushing through children, marriage, careers, teacher, conferences, temptation, graduations, middle age, divorce, and so on. Instead, they become codependent by feeding into each other's shortcomings and insecurities and dreams. So maybe they are ordinary buddies after all, which is all they want, but not for long because men abruptly change. In the end, someone must die first. An organ has to give or an accident unfolds, but for a time, a brief imagining indeed, their lives were equal, a boy in parallel with his old man's short-lived youth. This is what I imagined as I clasped my father's wrinkly hand in the back of an ambulance on the way to the hospice care facility, where our drive and ultimately our time together would end. So during our last ride together through the desert, I had fantasized we were the same age, only to give us more of what we could not obtain. Another road trip, another adventure, another weekend on an empty open road at its end. So the next piece I'm going to read is jumping into a chapter, A Sprig from Springtime, and it is titled Half Orphaned. Busted furniture, building materials, car guts, then a few feet away, loads more, old clothing, broken toys, soiled diapers. Roam further and memories slither about, whipped by wind, diaries, grocery lists, photographs. Even decomposed bodies of four-legged companions illegally scatter across this land. This land, a 583 square mile belt named the Gila River Indian Community, home of the Pima tribe, located south of Phoenix, Arizona. For this pilgrimage, I seek a parcel 0.4% of the homeland hidden in indigenous wilderness. It's a settlement Dad once led me to as a boy, its history stretching back to when Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia, Austria, Denmark, France, and so forth. In the same area, Benito Mussolini formed an alliance with Nazi Germany and declared war on the United States. Elsewhere, Imperial Japan invaded the Pacific, overtaking northern Indochina, leading eventually to a surprise assault on Pearl Harbor, where over 2,000 US military lives ended. From there, tensions raged, and that's the evidence I searched for. Decisions from World War II dumped on this land, Butte Camp, as it was remembered, an internment camp for Japanese Americans. The camp's whereabouts, however, are forgotten. All I remember is that it's south of Casablanca, nested by a plain-looking hill. My drive follows stretches of canals webbed across the desert frontier. I then fly along an overpass and enter private property. So I flip around, consult a map, reroute the itinerary, and seek deeper into farmland until 30 minutes on, I'm utterly lost. Shit. Where's the past Dad drove me to? My rental car scrapes brush, moans through potholes. This section of Resland, a sparse valley of crops, dirt roads, and tumbleweed, is unfamiliar. I'm disorientated in the homeland. Luckily, impatience pulls me over to some strange fellow bathing in canal water. Excuse me, I say, stepping out of the car. Do you know where I can find the Japanese internment camp? The strange fellow, a pelican-looking bird, flies to a seed-sown field. Not a peep. This is silly, of course, which is why I continue. My father took me there when I was about 8 years old, I explain. It's been a while and I need to go back. The pelican-looking bird flutters a half mile out. Motherfucker. Down the dirt road is another opportunity, a scraggy jackrabbit who vanishes before my window rolls down. Then a mile later, a quail, so flustered it can't pick a direction to flee, panics in circles before I'm abandoned for a third time. No one is helping. No one can. It's just me, so I must help myself by remembering the route back to Butte Camp. Loosen up, focus, dig. What do I remember? Only that Dad warned me to fight back. Fight who? Details are absent. There's only one option, leave no hill unsearched. Driving around a boulder-spackled hill, zilch. Onto the next mini mountain, nope. The third hill, a dead end. There must be a dozen hillsides within close driving distance and an endless horizon pimpled with more. By the fourth hillock, I'm done. Then I smell it, the memory. A springtime aroma rushes through a cracked window. Like magic, Dad's Chevy revs in my mind. He's driving and talking and warning me to fight the white man. They're going to pull you down, he advises. Fight back. Oh, his clear baritone. Fight back. I grip the steering wheel. The accelerator hits the floor. Dust kicks up. I know where to go. With windows rolled down, orange blossoms return me to boyhood. And if I could return, would Dad be waiting for me there? To a moment where I stretch outside Dad's Chevy to snatch blossoms from citrus trees lining the dusty road. You're going to have a tough life, Dad once said. Tough because of the white man. His warning was weekend propaganda shared between a brown man and his son. And out here, abroad a peopleless frontier, Dad was internally frank and nervous, paranoid even, about the modern era he had brought me into, an era he'd exit early. Interrupting my thoughts, another jackrabbit, one big son of a bitch, skirts in front of me and sprints as if to lead the way. I drive and chase the jackrabbit, for we are late, 2.5 decades too late. Road dust streaks a bright blue sky. The sun, slightly hot, slightly tolerable, invigorates the wild land. parked at the base of the plain-looking hill. Fragrant citrus sweeps across the 0.4% of reservation that, in its day from 1942 to 1945, incarcerated 13,000 Japanese Americans. There's not much left standing, however, just architectural stains. Where barracks had once amassed families during the camp's 3-year tenure, sun-cracked foundations are broken with green growth taking over. Greasewood bushes, weeds, long grasses, and other spring things sprout through asphalt. Gone are the walls, roofs, doors, beds, and families forcibly relocated, mostly from California, to our indigenous homeland. Despite tribal protests, the US government built the camp anyway by Executive Order 9066, signed and issued by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. But it's kaput. The barracks, lookout tower, staff facilities, water storage, mess hall, all 821 structures are missing at Butte Camp. I discover a pebbled path nearly healed back into earth. The straightforward track is unnatural in nature. Are humans the only creature codependent on linear direction? But it's exact same spot thousands obeyed for 3 years. Children, mothers, teachers, toddlers, aunts, scientists, elderly, athletes, preteens, veterans, philanthropists. And before he was Mr. Miyagi from The Karate Kid, an 11-year-old Noriyuki Pat Morita was hit by the brunt of the Gila River sun. Thousands march where I do, to fish in the canal, eat at the dining hall, or play at the baseball diamond or small theater, until a fork traps me. Intersecting directions beg me to choose, this way or the other. Neither sue me. Into the brush this pilgrim goes. Small stuff stops me. Mesh netting fuses with stubborn soil, crowbar claws from dirt like fingers of the living dead. Quills sprinkle about that, on closer inspection, are rusty nails. A tin can with a label long gone, a roof tile, just one. A sewage hole, I think, buzzing with mosquito water. And not so small as a mound of big things busted, mostly asphalt. It's a worthy heap of rubble to climb that I decide against as sweat drips off my chest. But if these walls could talk, if indeed that's what the rubble pile once was, the walls would say they were broken. And that's what it feels like out here. Not much has changed since boyhood. Then again, how could it? The Japanese were sent here without a choice, Dad had said, just like us meaning the Pima tribe. But why, I asked. What he said is gone. I'd asked his ghost, but folklore is an outdated way to lie. This land, the land of our mothers and fathers, is a dumping ground, and human evidence doesn't wash away so easily in the arid wild. There are cubic and rectangular cuboid shapes, slabs of cement, some a foot high, others 2 feet, whose purpose I'm not exactly sure of. I sit and count the columns around me, 47. The asphalt blocks remind me of the Berlin Memorial for Jews murdered during the Holocaust, a sloped grid covered with thousands of coffin-sized concrete pillars of varying heights, the shortest 8 inches with the tallest towering at 15 feet. When I visited the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe the year before, I sunk deep into the Berlin Memorial and past pillars taller than the last, as if drowning in an asphalt forest. There's a snapshot of me among the concrete slabs with a mug hesitant to smile and reluctant to frown, as if I was stuck in between. Aren't those the hours, stuck in between here and there, in between memorials, in between our parents' bodies and their grandchildren's? Across the Berlin Memorial was another, this one dedicated to homosexuals persecuted by Nazis. It's a massive asphalt cuboid built with an internal video screen broadcasting, at the time, 2 men kissing. 2 men kissing. I would have been persecuted by the Nazis for that alone if Dad didn't get to me first. The homeland pushes against me, the citrus-scented breeze, a high noon sun, bugs, the bzzing kind, the concrete slab beneath me, a premonition drifting about. As Dad warned me to fight the white man, he brought those battles home. When my teenage sister dated a mullet-draped white boy, for instance, Dad violently threatened my sister's boyfriend for nearly a decade. What would Dad say when it'd eventually be my turn to date a similar type, sans mullet? Sneaking out, running away, then leaving the house at 16, my sister and Dad had years of silence, followed by college graduations, marriage, and then a grandbaby for Dad, his first, which softened most of his rough edges. If only I could have rounded the rest of his corners. But as a preteen, I threw a fit for reasons unremembered, and Dad revealed there was no guidebook to fatherhood. Junior, he said, I'm making it up as I go along, he lamented. fatherly temperament and improvisation, the crux of life and its flaw. Atop the plain-looking hill is a plaque dedicated to Japanese Americans soldiers killed during WW2. According to the plaque, over 1,000 internees entered military service. An acknowledgement identifies soldiers who sacrificed their lives. Some names may be unlisted by choice, it says, while others were not located, but they are all equally honored. When Dad and I hiked this hill 2.5 decades ago, 23 Japanese names were spray painted over. No respect, Dad muttered. Now, my father's age, I study the plaque. The spray paint is gone. The scars they tended, evicted from homes, forced to sell their possessions and businesses, shipped in trains like cattle, then imprisoned behind barbed wire for years, only to be released into the American wild, which is more prejudiced than the natural wild. Some internees returned home to discover their property in the hands of new ownership, while others settled near towns the internment camps hosted. Then the predictable bigotry, vandalism, gunfire, and brimstone continued for Japanese American families. 4 men, for instance, set off an explosion on the Doi family farm in California in 1945. Despite one of the men implicating the other men, and with a Doi son serving in the US military overseas, a defense attorney argued, "This is white man's country." All 4 men were acquitted. Butte Camp was shut down 10 November 1945. 90 days later, an atomic bomb annihilated Hiroshima. 3 days later, Nagasaki flash burnt 2. Japan surrendered. WW2 ended. The scarring I reference, does the white man, the very same Dad warned me about, stitch the wounds their trickery inflicts? There's a panoramic view of the handsome desert, citrus groves, cotton or alfalfa fields, I can't tell. Whatever is farmed in spring, then more fields beyond that, followed by mobile homes, adobe houses, and villages. Casablanca among them. I don't stay too long because the sun is brutal and so is time. The ripples hit the hardest, ripples of eras that are not my own. The desert does this to me and I don't know why. It's as if I'm a pebble skipping across dimensions, exploring histories not belonging to me. And I come out the other side jet-lagged in my own time, worn, chipped, going mad, I suspect. Dad guided me through these era skippings nearly every weekend. Venturing together in the homeland was critical for him. Why? Never mind, because just like the debris out here, I've been discarded with the rest of the fatherless. The desert is a dumping ground. Living involves gestation, birth, procreation, expiration, and inconveniently disposal. There's no alternative to the seasons, yet trusty spring is here. What I mean is that I went to Hiroshima to tie it all together. Beneath an ordinary sky where the atom bomb detonated 1,900 feet above a medical clinic, I imagined hell spewing across the city, unfolding from the epicenter where mothers and children burned in seconds. Then the outer ring roared and leveled curves, both natural and man-made, boiling skin with cloth and steel. At last, radiation fell like rain and poisoned everything with a heartbeat. I was not prepared for this, neither were the victims. But survivors rebuilt the city I wept in. Things grew back, and spring, she helps by covering old things up. Then again, it's the young who do that best, even if, and at their peak, it's temporary relief. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DA. Our next reader is Tiffany Midge, a citizen of the Standing Rock Sioux Nation who was raised by wolves in the Pacific Northwest. Her book, Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, was a finalist for the 2020 Washington State Book Award. She's the recipient of the Kenyon Review Earthworks Indigenous Poetry Prize, a Pushcart Prize, a Simons Public Humanities Fellowship, and an Eliza So Fellowship. Her work has appeared in World Literature Today, First American Art Magazine, McSweeney's, Waxwing, The Offing, Gay Magazine, Lit Hub, Massachusetts Review, Yes Magazine, and more. Midge resides in the Inland Northwest and aspires to be the distinguished writer-in-residence for Seattle's Space Needle. Please welcome Tiffany.
I thought that I would read some pieces from my book, Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, and I never get tired of saying that either. Okay, this piece is called Headlines. I've been saving newspaper clippings, curious human interest stories to inspire my writing efforts. A cache of yellowed newsprint lies in a small pile. Woman fed with death of overfed toddler. Man married 29 times will have funeral. Mermaid girl to have legs split. One clipping is particularly compelling. Mother's coma ends after 16 years. The woman resurrected from her coma is Standing Rock Sue. She emerged from her 16-year sleep on Christmas Eve, and her nickname is Happy, which makes me think of the Seven Dwarfs, which makes me think of another Disney icon, Sleeping Beauty, a more apt attribution. My headline collection today is harvested mostly from Facebook news feeds. The day my pastor claimed that gay people are possessed by fart demons that can drive pigs to suicide. Charles Manson's wedding canceled. Bride just wanted his corpse to make money. Idaho lawmaker wonders if women could have a gyno exam by swallowing a little camera. Years ago, I watched a TV movie starring Elizabeth Montgomery from Bewitched. The movie was about a woman who reemerged after being in a coma for over a decade. Her readjustment from being a popular high school cheerleader to being poised on the end of middle-aged met with harrowing challenges. A handsome high school basketball coach fell in love with her, and after much aggressive pursuit to break down the barriers of her teenage shyness, which culminated by the literal breaking down of her door yelling, "Love me," she finally submitted. These days, there'd be a 12-step group for what the basketball coach was inflicted with, not to mention a restraining order. Pastor claims women are penis homes and men's penises belong to God. My Aunt Carlotta suffered a brain aneurysm and she never woke up. She'd always been active and in good health. She and her husband had just adopted a little boy. She sent us pictures. And then abruptly, silence. For nearly 2 decades, she slept, wasted away, slept, growing thinner and thinner, sleeping and sleeping in a convalescent home outside of Glasgow, Montana. Her husband remarried. Her little boy grew up and married. Relatives passed away, presidents served out their terms, were reelected, served out those terms. More headlines. The Berlin Wall fell. The UN declared war in the Middle East. Waco, O.J. Simpson, Oklahoma City, terrorism, cloned sheep, first Black president. My aunt slept and slept. Practical help for the demon-possessed. Vatican rolls out new exorcism course. Some thought my aunt was a victim of Indian witchery, a jealous enemy perhaps, an imagined trespass or a real trespass. I don't know that I believe in those things. I don't know if I even believe in ghosts. Believing might only allow such things to surface. Once I wished out loud for a woman to be dead, and the next year she died, her body blooming with tumors. She was my boyfriend's old lover, a kindled old flame, and was a catalyst for the breakup of his marriage, a wedge in his relationships that followed, like with me. I was not the only woman in his life who seethed with jealousy. Woman in sumo wrestler suit assault ex-girlfriend in gay pub after she waved at man dressed as a Snickers bar. My father had dated my Aunt Carlotta before he met and married my mother. Carlotta was my mother's sister-in-law. It was less than a year after my mother's husband died that my mother married my father, her sister-in-law's ex-lover. I wish I knew why my dad and Carlotta broke up. I don't know if there was any animosity between my mother and Carlotta. They always seemed to be good friends, but you never know. It is easy to become confused about these things. Students cook and serve grandparents. My mother's best friend in Heber, Montana, Twyla, was stricken with a troubled marriage. Maybe stricken is the wrong word. It wasn't like getting the flu, but then again, maybe a troubled marriage is like getting the flu. If I can wish someone dead, certainly someone else could catch a bad marriage, that marital virus that's going around, maybe even a hex. Twyla's husband stalked her wherever she went out. He thought she was running around on him. Mason stowed away in the trunk of her Riviera, and she caught him when she put groceries in the trunk. On another night, my mother dropped by to visit, and as she was getting out of her car to walk up to the house, she discovered Mason perched 12 feet high in the branches of a tree spying on his wife. Man with nothing to declare has 55 tortoises in his pants. The Lakota word for horse is Shinka Wakam, Wakam which translate to sacred or mystery, and Shinka meaning dog. The Sioux are a horse culture, and the horse is highly revered, a spiritual being. This makes my childhood allergies to horsehair particularly ironic. It would have been hard for me if I lived in olden times. I was also allergic to rabbit fur as a child, and this seems less of a problem since, as far as I know, rabbits weren't especially revered, not like horses anyway. I suppose my father didn't take this into account, the fact that my mother was Lakota and raised on a reservation in eastern Montana, when he brought home what looked like a gift and presented it to my mother. It was a package wrapped in brown butcher paper and tied off with white string. Words were exchanged between my parents, voices raised, some alarm, and then my mother rushing from the kitchen in tears, my father calmly pulling out a frying pan, unwrapping the meat from its brown paper, cooking it like it was any other. PETA suggests Washington Redskins keep controversial name, change logo to potato. I learned of death's paradoxes when I was 6, how acts of violence are sometimes demonstrations of mercy, even love. Along a Pacific beach, he found a wounded mallard and applied an act to end its suffering. From flight to prey to naturalist specimen, the mallard submitted to an inexact science, one of air and wind, one of pressure and temperature, one of sand and ocean salt. Along the viscera and ruins, my father indicated the transparent bubble. This is how it floats. A fretwork of shadow and light, the blood mirrored, the portentous reading of clouds, a swirl of lines and curves from where a song begins. Emotional support pig kicked off flight for being disruptive. The last time I ever saw Jeff alive, he gave me a gift, an hourglass. And it took over 2 decades for me to realize the symbolism. An hourglass, gifted from a young man with one foot planted in the next world. His time was running out. Even the hourglass he gifted me appeared to have been stolen. I imagine from the desktop of one of the school classrooms he was hired to clean. Not borrowed time, but stolen. Old man 98 wins lottery, dies next day. Agoraphobic grandmother finally leaves home, immediately falls down manhole. When were these photos taken? I asked my mother. We are removing items from her dresser drawers, taking inventory to prepare for the day she will die. She has lung cancer. I hold up the black and white photos for her to see. I have never seen these before. There are 3 pictures, all taken in the same location, some isolated forest road. She looks gorgeous, disheveled, dreamy. They are from an earlier era, the 70s, taken when I was still very small, when I lived with both of my parents, my sister and my grandfather. The photos were taken by her lover, a man my mother admits was a close friend of our family. I barely remember him. She hid the pictures away for years. The eagle has landed. 2 men walk on the moon. Chronicles of an affair with his secretary found in an abandoned suitcase. Lana Turner's daughter fatally stabs her mother's lover. All right. Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was wonderful. Thanks. Our next reader is Elissa Washuta, a nonfiction writer and member of the Cowlitz Indian tribe. Her book, White Magic, will be published by Tin House on April 27th. She's also the author of Starvation Mode and My Body is a Book of Rules, named a finalist for the Washington State Book Award. With Teresa Warburton, she is co-editor of the anthology Shapes of Native Nonfiction, collected essays by contemporary writers. She is an assistant professor of creative writing at The Ohio State University. Welcome, Alyssa.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for getting us together. This has been so great. I'm going to read from White Magic. I'm going to read the beginning of an essay called Oregon Trail 2 for Windows 95, 98, ME, and Macintosh. Challenge the unpredictable frontier. Double-click the CD-ROM icon. A window will open. Click, click, new game. Conjure up an escape route. If you want to disembark from the life you've known, there's a trail. But you can't know the expanse of what's ahead. Staggering vistas, sickening width of the sky, skin stink. Your Oregon Trail exists inside a rectangular window, a finite world with 3 possible destinations and a handful of ways to die. Click, go. Alyssa, yes, you've made it clear you're on a quest for freedom, but limits will save your life. You're a pharmacist who has come to Council Bluffs in 1855 for the purpose of setting off on a journey west to Oregon City. You've already bought a large farm wagon, but you still need to buy the other supplies you'll need for your journey. You're accompanied by 3 others. Kurt Cobain, age 30. Mia Zapata, age 30. Lane Staley, age 35. Travel the trail. In town, a man with a smart vest and bow tie wants to sell you a package of supplies. Exit this man. You've traveled this trail more times than he could imagine. In the dry goods and grocery store, you carve into your stack of pioneer money to buy 1 axe, 200 pounds of bacon, no brandy, no banjo. You buy 3, no, make that 5 boxes of bullets, 2 butcher knives. You buy out the pickles and acquire enough oxen to drag your pickle kegs across the land. This is the best part of the journey, so much like the late night Winco trips you make in your real life outside this window, now that you've moved to the suburbs. The discount rice and bulk beans you buy aren't sustenance so much as protection from famine. Inside the window, you change your mind and buy brandy because here you are a white man. In this place that is both safe and unsafe, you can have all the brandy you want. You buy no bags of beads. You don't know what Duffy's elixir and James Fever powder are, but you know whiskey and tobacco. These were abstractions when you set out on this trail 20 years ago. You weren't acquainted with the sweet, toxic astringency of spirits. You buy 3 gallons of whiskey because outside the window, you've lost whiskey forever. You just passed the 7-month sober mark. You're a miracle. You buy laudanum and a rifle. Morale is high. You depart. The choice of starting date used to feel arbitrary. Whether you left in 1840, 1865, or any year in between, you traveled the same trail, albeit one with different stops and travelers. No matter when you leave, you'll pass Chimney Rock, run into heavy fog and severe thunderstorms, and shoot yourself while hunting. This time, though, you choose 1855, the year your great-great-great-grandfather and 11 other headmen signed the treaty that completed the cession of the Willamette Valley to the United States. Inside the window, you'll be one of so many settlers who strike out that summer after reading newspaper notices from Washington Territory Governor Isaac Stevens declaring the land open and available. Your adventure begins at a river. Check the river conditions. The Missouri River appears to be a fairly ordinary river. Caulk the wagons and float. While you watch the wagon's cover moving from shore to shore, you never even think about going under. You traveled west 8 years ago in a Chevrolet. Your route was not the trail gouged out of the land in the early 19th century. You began on Route 80 in New Jersey, took 90 through the Midwest, 94 through the Northern Plains, 90 again in Montana, and rode that all the way to your new home, your promised land, your city of destiny, Seattle. You have only 3 memories of that overland adventure. A gas station convenience store where you bought Skittles, a hotel room, and a sign warning you to watch out for rattlesnakes. You, 22 and wrecked by liquor and meds, needed a fresh start. In the West, the trees stayed green in the winter. You didn't know that the West would maim you worse than the East. It wasn't the overland trail that would do it, 3.5 days without cholera or dysentery. Your demise came from the provisions you tried not to pack into your wagon. You've traveled 3 miles when you get the itch to select your rifle and stare at the flat expanse of green. A squirrel hops across the prairie. You want to kill it, but you are a patient hunter. Your boyfriend of a month, Philip, is a week into his month-long vacation in China, and you haven't heard a word from him. His motivation for going, in the ways of the whites, is to be enriched by another culture. He is an honest man. That is why he doesn't say he'll miss you. If you had any real patience, you wouldn't have committed to the first guy you went on a Tinder date with after being dumped by another. You and Philip have nothing in common. He's a programmer, a libertarian, an optimist, a board game enthusiast, and an upper middle class white man who keeps saying his parents met in Mensa, which he calls a social club, but you're attracted to him and he's harmless. What is the right fit anyway? People say relationships stop feeling like magic eventually, so you figure you might as well start one without any spark to lose. Anyway, you have no frame of reference for the right fit, only models of danger, disrespect, and indifference. No deer, no bears, no meat. You shoot a jackrabbit. Firing 3 times, you shot 4 pounds of game and were able to carry all of it back to your wagon. If you continue to hunt in this area, game will be scarce. You stop in town. A woman with a bonnet tells you about a party that came through. Several mean scoundrels who tore up the local saloon and terrorized some of the people here. The white man's mask you wear inside the window has her fooled. You've torn up your share of saloons. No, that's not right. You've torn yourself up in your share of saloons. 20 years ago, you, your parents, and your brother huddled around a PC monitor and started your first journey after coming home from an after-church mall stroll. The world inside the window soon felt like another room in your house. Now you're alone in your apartment and it's getting dark. Moving out to the suburbs seemed like a good idea in the winter when you were trying not to drink. You wanted a big place and you wanted to be as alone as your heart felt. You chose a suburb where you'd see evergreens, a road that gives way to Puget Sound and cars cross the dotted stretch of the map only by ferry, a block with saltwater smelling air, an apartment so large, bare-walled, and underfurnished that your mumblings to your cat echo around the living room only 3 people have visited in the 9 months it's been yours. Now you've lifted your forearms off the condensation slick tavern slab that your spine curled over like a fern that would never open. There are no bars within walking distance of the new place. You spend evenings in your apartment, watching your brain do the same thing over and over, which is scan itself for the flaw that is going to kill you. While your body stays safe at home, you need to travel out of your isolation through this window. So you've come back to the trail, where you have someone to talk to. The faces are more familiar than the teachers and clergy who instructed you in how to live. The preformed lines of dialogue, a part of you in the way Bible verses never were. If they're living in your memory, are these people not real? In New Jersey, the only Indians you knew were the 2 others in your house and the ones who lived in TV and helped white people find their inner noble savages. Disney's Pocahontas showed you Indians who were shot by the colonizers they loved. The year of its release, you first slipped through this window into the trail, where you sucked venom out of wounds, ignored any ailment that wouldn't kill you, and drove your oxen until they couldn't stand. You always were a good colonizer. You continue. You shoot at a deer with your shotgun and miss. When it runs across the grass, you feel as if someone has a finger in a hole in your chest, stretching the wound. You stare at the neat line of the horizon, wait for another animal apparition, and wish you could administer some laudanum. In another window, you ask, what is laudanum? Laudanum is drugs. That you surmised as a child, fascinated by the teachings of Dare. You wanted to see visions and act like you weren't yourself. Laudanum is an alcohol-based opium tincture, wouldn't have meant anything to you. Things have happened. You have grown. You understand laudanum. You thought the West would free you from the version of yourself you'd gotten tangled up in. Instead, you became more bound to it than ever, tethered to the toilet bowl, wed to caustic drink. You concocted laudanum from whiskey and painkillers, mixing up a patent medicine you were sure could cure all your ailments, your own version of Duffy's elixir. But the dry goods and grocery store was miles back. Laudanum is only sold in town. You've checked every penny ante outpost on this trail just to see. And anyway, no trail ailment is improved by administering laudanum. There's always a better way to heal. You still long to yank yourself out of feeling. You get so lonesome, you go to the high-end grocery store to talk to the artisan yogurt bar man who always mentions his time as a school teacher. Inside the window, you're always with your party. You shoot your rifle at a deer and it turns from a grazing thing into a lump. The hole in your chest closes. You have a purpose here. Firing one time, you shot 166 pounds of game and were able to carry all of it back to your wagon. If you continue to hunt in this area, game will be scarce. 2 years ago, you began weekly sessions with a therapist whose office was filled with crystals. The only thing you knew about astrology was your sun sign, but your therapist said you were experiencing your Saturn return. The planet, once every 30 years or so, returns to the spot in the zodiac it occupied when you were born. In this rite of passage, Saturn, celestial taskmaster, breaks apart and reassembles your life. Your job became intolerable when your boss snapped into tyranny. Your first book came out. Your long relationship with Kevin ended, and you moved outside the city. You got sober. 4 of Cups, featuring a person under a tree, arms crossed, refusing the cup offered by an extended hand. After weeks of this, you understood it was time, once and for all, after fits and starts and trials and failures and dry spells flooded, to get sober. But you still needed to buy the other supplies you'd need for your journey. A new moon webinar, a book of spells, a baggie of dried mistletoe, a tin of incense, a tiny cauldron. You recently turned an end table into an altar and learned to read the shapes left in a spent candle's wax because you've come to believe you might be a witch, like that one character on The Magicians, a show you and Philip watch. Julia, denied entrance to the school for magicians where her protagonist friend matriculates, becomes what they call a hedge witch. Cast out on her own, forced to learn magic without forced to learn magic without instruction. The internet says hedge witches are real and you haven't told anyone, but you think you might be one. You've been hoping for a sign, something to make you feel in your gut that it's real, not just TV. One day, while you were frying tofu and kept getting bitten by the tiny drops of oil popping from the pan, you thought, I just want one thing in my life to be a little easier and less painful. Just one thing. Maybe I should get a fry daddy. Hours later, outside your office on campus, the free book table had no books, only an unopened box holding a brand new fry daddy. God is everything or he is nothing, your sponsor likes to say. That was the moment the mystery dropped from your head to your gut. You have always been in the mystery. The choice is not to be a witch or not be a witch, not to believe in magic or to believe in reality, but to be an open door or a closed one. You are good at making choices. You continue. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Our final reader tonight is Jake Skeets. Jake is the author of Eyes Bottle Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers, winner of the National Poetry Series. He is the recipient of a 92Y Discovery Prize, a Mellon Projecting All Voices Fellowship, an American Book Award, and a Whiting Award. He is from the Navajo Nation and teaches at Dene College. Welcome, Jake.
Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're coming to us from. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm honored to share this space with these amazing writers. Allow me first to introduce myself in Dene. Yat A, Matthew Jake Skeets in She, Sanajini Nishlan, Tskobahan Bashish Chin, Skachini Dashu Che, Do Torikoshan Dashinella. Again, thank you so much for having me. Thank you all so much for being here. I am a poet, so I'm going to be reading poetry for you all. I'll start with my book, Eyes Waddle Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers, and I'll transition into some newer work that I've been working through and trying to wrestle out of, I guess, wherever poetry is contained. This first poem is called Drunk Town, and it opens up my first collection. And it really sets the setting for the book. Normally we think of poetry as this interior thing. So I was very much interested in my book to have it become an exterior thing. So this is setting up the setting. Drunk Town. Indian, Eden, open tooth, bone, bruise, this town split in two. Clocks ring out as train horns. Each hour hand drags into a screech. Iron, steel, iron. The minute hand runs its fingers through the outcrops. Junk town. Junk is the punch, town a gasp. In between the letters are boots crushing tumbleweeds. A tractor tire backing over a man's skull. Men around here only touch when they fuck in a back seat. Go for the foul with 30 seconds left. Hug their sons after high school graduation. Open a keg. Stab my uncle 47 times behind a liquor store. A bar called Eddie's sits at the end of the world. By the tracks, drunk men get some sleep. My father's uncle tries to get some under a long bed truck. The truck backs up to go home. I arrange my father's boarding school soap bones on white space and call it a poem. Like my father, I come upon death, staggering into the house with fear on the breath. Mule deer splintered in barbed tendon, gray highway veins, narrow, push, pull under teal and red hills. A man is drunk staggering into northbound lanes, dollar bills for his index and ring fingers, sands glitter with broken bottles. Greens, deep blues, clears, and golds. This place is White Cone, Greasewood, Sanders, Whitewater, Bread Springs, Crystal, Chinle, Nazlini, Indian Wells, and all muddy roads lead from Gallup. The sky places an arm on their near heels. On the shoulder, dark gray, almost blue, bleeds into greens, blue greens, turquoise into hazy blue, pure blue, no gray or gold or oil black seeped through. If I stare long enough, I see my uncle in a mirror. The bottle caps we use for eyes. An owl has a skeleton of 3 letters. O twists into L. The burrowing owl burrows under dead cactus. Feathers fall on horseweed and skull bone, blown, open. This poem is called Dear Brother. Dear brother, you kissed a man the way I do, but with a handgun. You called it, I'm the fag we were afraid to know, the one we throw rocks at, huff at like horses. I learned to touch a man by touching myself. I learned to be a man by loving one. Prison is not the chicken wire we'd get tangled in. Remember our bloody knees and bloody palms from mangled handlebars, beer bottles, and cactus spines. Remember the horned toad we didn't mean to kill. Our silence, thick as the dust kicked up by our skinny legs. You are still that silence, still that boy holding a deflated body with your dawning hands. The body a bottle. Cracked hawkweed sacrum, nectar bitter from the flower. Its pelvis dyed, matter dark, petal to sepal frazzled, limp like a lazy eye. Weed bud calcified on a bottle of muddy gin, water swollen in the body, yellow matter crushed into sand, fresh blood oozes at the lips, the hair matted roots, inlet of a river done in. And this poem closes the collection. It's called In the Fields, with lines from D.A. Powell. We unyoke marrow from desert meadow. I'm sorry, let me start over. In the fields. We unyoke owl pellets from marrow in desert meadow. His mouth a pigeon eye, a torch, a womb-turned flower. He, still a boy, dug from cactus skull, undresses into bark beetles. He unlearns how to hold a fist with my hand, bursts into dandelion seeds. We all are beautiful at least once. Mud water puddles along enamel, eye teeth blossom into osprey. Our bones dampened like snow melt under squirrel grass. We could be boys together finally as milkvetch, tumbleweed, and sticker bush. We can be beautiful again beneath the sumac, yarrow, and bitterwater. And this is the last poem I'll read from the collection, and I'll transition to some newer work. It's called Buffalo Grass. Barely morning curtains drape an open window. Roaches scatter. The letter T vibrating in cottonwoods, his hair horsetail and snakeweed. I siphon doubt from his throat for the buffalo grass. Seep willow antler pressed against the memory of the first man I saw naked. His tongue a mosquito whispering its name, a hymn on mesquites, my cheek. The things we see the other do collapse words into yucca bone. The Navajo word for I hardens into the word for war. And writing new work has been a challenge. I've only written a few poems, but I'm at work as much as I can on a new collection, hopefully. So this next poem that I'm going to read is actually a remix, or I guess a revision of that Buffalo Grass poem. And the way I've been revising and writing new work has been going through a process that I borrowed from Danette Weavers, of really looking at the way the loom is constructed and following the process that Danette Weavers take when they're creating their rugs. And so to test this out, I've just been using old poems from this book and recycling them through and revising them through this process. And these are sort of the poems that have been coming of that particular project. And this is one of the first ones that I wrote. I just titled it Loom Poem 1. I window naked words into a name. First press the throat. I cheek hair, seep whisper, throat scatter, do the whispering. Wore the words in the barely morning. I snakeweed another name. Collapse tongue into war, memory against pink siphon, against bone, bone, pink siphon, against memory, against collapse tongue into war. I snakeweed another name. Wore the words in the barely morning. Do the whispering, throat scatter, seep whisper, cheek hair. I first press the throat. I window naked words into a name. And I'll finish up with just 2 short poems from my new work, new collection, if I'm brave enough to call it that, maybe. This one actually started as an essay. I was writing about memories of growing up, where I grew up on, south in New Mexico, right at the Four Corners area. But after revision and sort of thinking through this essay, I revised it all the way down to just an 8-line poem. Eating wild carrots with my brothers on the mesa. Cicada wane. Water and sun race every infinite evening. Fall exists for the dock route to oxalates. Each roof of every mouth. Each winter with its obsessed wind. Each spring that sees storm after storm. Each wild that wilds. Pasque flowers. Opening palms to straight rain. And I'll finish with this poem. Again, thank you so much for inviting me. This poem is called He Said My Name. He said my name is really a kiln, a hall of groundwater, because the mouth can open into hot vapor. He said my name is actually a riverbed. He said to make of my name a choking of cracked ice. He said to say my name is old water in a ditch. He said to make of my name a peach tree on fire, a palm of pollen. He said my name is really an aquifer, an astrofield, an orchestra of damp tarps in a sheep corral, a downed pole in Rock Springs. He said my name is as tall as a smokestack. He said my name has a tendency to cause a draft, to be a touch of tequila. He said my name is really splintered reed, heavy blue mornings in June. He said to make of my name wildfire smoke. He said to say my name is a rumor, the low beams of a pickup. He said my name is really a sermon of locusts, boulder rust, and a river gorge. He said to make of my name a desert garden. He said my name is the one pink evening when you whisper your name to the moon and it whispers back a monsoon. Yeah, thank you.
That was so beautiful. Thank you, Jake. And thank you everyone for sharing all of your readings. We're very grateful to all of you for being here. Now we'll hand it over to DA, who will be helping to facilitate a short discussion with tonight's authors. For our audience at home, we'd like to remind you that many of our authors, including some who are here with us tonight, will be joining for a live Q&A event on Sunday, April 18th. Make sure to check that out on our schedule, which you can find on our website, getlitfestival.org. And now, DA, will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for hosting us. As I mentioned earlier, I'm really excited to pick the brains of these writers. So let's do some brain picking. So I have 2 questions for each of the writers, and we'll just go in the order, the reading order. So we'll start with you, Tiffany. So let me begin with a story. In my non-writing life, I'm a teacher. I taught elementary school, I've taught high school, I've taught GED in college, students, and I promise the story has a point. But the one demographic I will never teach is middle school. Hormone-driven young people, no way, no how. Similarly, you do a lot of humorous or comedic writing. That is another thing I will never do or can do. And those in our audience who are not familiar with writing humor or comedy, it is tough, it's ruthless, it's unforgiving, and incredibly fickle. So my question for you, Tiffany, is first, why? Why be good at that? And then also, how are you good at that? So that's, I'll start there.
Gosh, thank you for saying that I'm good at something. It's nice to be good at something. For me, I have a very irreverent sense of the world. And I grew up with an incredibly critical father. And so, I mean, all of his sort of voice is always resonating in my own mind. And I think that a lot of humor and comedy is just a reaction to, sort of things in the world that are unjust or absurd, as we have viewed from the last several years. An unreality kind of thing. Like, it's difficult to even believe that, we're living within this realm of what everyone agrees is reality. And so I think of just a lot of my takes on events that occur around me and in my environment and in the world is just definitely, a byproduct of that, or what we would call, humor. And it's just a way to deal with feelings and things that crop up in the world. It's nice to be able to write those things down and to sort of share that viewpoint. And, and I think that it's nice if people find value from that. And I think that that's the writer's job too, in any form that the one's writing takes, is to share, and find a balm or a healing, or just to be able to commiserate. I just think that that's an amazing thing that writers perform and do for the world. And it's good to be able to write humorous stuff, and don't underestimate yourself. You might write something really funny one day. Even out of the dark things, I find humor. And I know that, and that's irreverent and inappropriate, but it's just something that I think is very necessary in a lot of ways, to just find the lightness, even in the dark times. So it's just a sanity keeping mechanism, right? Yeah. All right.
Cool. No, and what you're talking about, and I think one of the most humorous pieces I've read, or just things I think are funny, is when you point towards the absurdness of life. And for sure 2020 was nothing but absurd. I mean, that's an understatement. So I'm curious, for my follow-up question for you is, your book Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, which is a very interesting title, especially for Native communities, but also you're spinning it right. And so I just have a blurb about the book, and it's a powerful and compelling collection of Tiffany's musings on life, politics, and identity as a Native woman in America. So there's nothing more absurd, or at least encountering absurdness, than being a Native woman in America. So for you then, based on how you define, absurdness or comedic moments in life, what are those benchmarks? In other words, how can you tell us something that you write is, funny in your terms?
If it makes me laugh. If it makes me laugh, it's funny. And, I'm responding too, because, a lot of Alyssa's work is really, really funny. You know, and I know that people recognize Alyssa's work as being funny. And I think, you know, that adds to her popularity and her allure as a writer is how enjoyable and interesting a lot of her essays are. And so there's, you know, and I love that about Native writing because, you know, so much of it is funny. And a lot of people, I think, don't really view it that way, or they're not known as like, oh, she's hilarious or he's hilarious. But, you know, for a very, very long time, for decades, there's been just a huge amount of Native writing that's very funny. And I don't think a lot of people get that. I don't think the wider audience like really like gets that. But your question was, how do I know? Yeah, and the most obvious answer is, you know, how is my reaction to that? Does it make me laugh? And yeah, so that's pretty much the benchmark.
Fair enough. And I like I just had this vision of you writing and then just you're laughing and then you're like, that's it. And then you're going, oh, there's another one. Yep. And then yeah, just
I'm usually
repeat.
throwing up or crying, but laughing's good.
Again, for our audience who aren't aware of the process of writing, that's very familiar territory for all of us, I'm sure. And then also with comedic writing, again, very, very tough to do. So actually, and I just have one more last question for you, Tiffany, before we move on to Alyssa, and that is, what's next for you writing wise? What are you working on?
I have like 3 different things going on all at the same time, 3 or 4 or 5 different things going on all at the same time. And it's a difficult place to be sometimes because I don't know if I'm ever going to, will I live to see the next book that comes out. Yeah, so I've got a book of poetry that's very comedic. I was going to read some today, but I ran out of time. And so I have a book coming out, and then I'm working on a young adult fiction book. And I'm always writing my essays, and I write a column every 2 weeks. That's why I'm so tired today, is because I was up like all night long finishing this dadgum column. So those are the only things that I can actually think of at the moment through my brain fog.
No, it's a very typical writing hustle for sure. So we all gotta keep up. So great. Thank you so much, Tiffany.
Thank you.
And for our audience, Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's is available. So definitely purchase that book. Okay, moving on to Alyssa. So Alyssa, first, congratulations are definitely in order for White Magic, which is going to be out, I believe, April 27, 2021 from Tin House. So where did the concept, Alyssa, of White Magic come from? And let me just read this kind of quick blurb about it. In this collection of intertwined essays, Alyssa writes about land, heartbreak, and colonization, about life without the escape hatch of intoxication, and about how she became a powerful witch. So very powerful statements there. So again, where did this concept of white magic come from?
It was, I feel like there was a book before a concept. I don't know how to say it, but basically I was working on this thing for like years, you know, and I was just trying to write a second book. I didn't know what it was going to be. I was trying to make something that was easier to sell than my first book. And, you know, I tried writing a novel. I tried writing a book about the paleo diet, like it was, you know, a new thing then. And I was on the paleo diet, and I thought, well, this is about to be hot. Let me get in on this with the paleo diet memoir. That did not work at all. And, you know, I was just trying to feel my way into another book, wondering whether I would, you know, ever write another book, whether I was really a writer. I mean, I knew I was a writer, but I didn't know if it was sustainable. So I was just working on various pieces of things. The essay that I read an excerpt from was one of the earlier things that I kind of started drafting. And I knew I was writing about colonization first because I felt like there was so much more that I wanted to say about that I had not said in my first book. So I knew I wanted to write about colonization and pop culture. but that's all I really knew. I think that it sort of came together just because I was having this real like lived experience of getting sober. I wasn't really writing at that time. And, you know, I moved from Seattle out here to Ohio and, you know, started a full-time job. And while everything was in flux, there was just no book. And then after I got here, I started writing a lot and I realized, you know, what I already had. I had, you know, a bunch of pieces of things and I didn't really think of them as being part of the same book. I thought I was working on something altogether different once I got here and started writing. I thought I was writing a book about that was just about getting sober. And as soon as I had written a couple essays, I realized this is all one book. And it's just up to me to figure out what the actual story is and where I need to take it next. So, you know, it was not until it was at least half done or 3/4 of the way done that I realized, you know, what the actual concept was, that this was a book about, you know, so much about land. I didn't realize how much I wrote about land, maybe until I realized how little I was seeing in some of the other work I was reading. I mean, particularly by non-native writers. And yeah, and I started becoming more interested in writing about astrology, tarot, witchcraft, etc. So I'd say that, you know, that's the long answer. The short answer is the concept. I came up with the concept when I was writing the copy about what the book is about.
You know, and what that is just a testament to the craft of writing itself. I always think of it as a marathon. Am I running in a loop? I'm exhausted. Why am I doing this? All these doubts and sacrifice you make, and it's not until you reach a summit and can look at the view and realize, oh, okay, this is where I'm at, and this is where maybe I can go. So I can definitely appreciate that for sure. And so my follow-up question then for you, Alyssa, is then you did co-edit the anthology Shapes of Native Nonfiction, collected essays by contemporary writers from the University of Washington Press, a wonderful, wonderful collection. And I encourage all of you to check it out. But this anthology is a testament to the Indigenous literary renaissance I believe we are in. And so broadly speaking, what did you learn from these Indigenous voices as you were working on this anthology?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, I think sorry, I need to think about it a second. One thing that I really felt like I came away with was, you know, by the time I had read all of these essays over and over and over, you know, deciding what we wanted to put in the anthology, revisiting once we had everything, including 2 essays by Tiffany, by the way. We're very lucky to have Tiffany's work in that anthology. You know, after that, and then, you know, copy editing and more copy editing, I had read all of these essays so many times, and yet I don't feel like I am an expert on them because they are so rich, and all of them defy a really, you know, quick and easy understanding. I think, you know, that is the main thing that I was sort of surprised by. I just figured if you read something so many times, you're going to know it inside and out. And really, I still, every time I read over these essays, you know, in my teaching, when I talk about these essays with students, I notice so many new things all the time and feel like I'm just still in awe of all of them.
And I just want to express my appreciation for you co-editing this anthology, because what it's doing is changing the canon of literature, and for sure needs an upgrade ASAP. So again, I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And then just my last question, similar to Tiffany, and is what's next for you writing wise?
Well, I had wanted to take a break from writing. In a sense, I have. A lot. I know a lot, for a lot of writers, it is helpful for them when they have a book coming out to be working on something else. I really didn't want to. Once I knew what that I was working on a book of some kind, I really worked really hard and wrote quite a lot in a short period of time. And just with that and everything else, I'm really tired. And I don't feel like I'm done with white magic. I still want, I'm just getting started reading from it and talking about it. And, I'm not sick of it. I'm just getting started sharing it with people. So I'm not ready to move on to another project yet. At the same time, I was going to give myself a break, but I've been wanting to write about the end of the world. And so, I've been kind of doing this thing that's been, happening for a while, where I have this, a sentence or a few words I'm carrying around in my head. And I'm thinking, like, I know this is going to be an essay at some point, but probably not till the summer when I'm not teaching. And then, I just am carrying it. And then all of a sudden I'll be in a meeting or something, and I just have to open the Word doc and get out the first paragraph. So I have one long essay that I've written over the past year about, it's about a lot of things, like my work generally is, but it's about chronic illness and epidemics in Washington that killed the Cascade people and other peoples in what's now Washington in the 19th century, and multiple things in there. And now I'm working on another essay that seems to be about the end times as well, and the potential of economic collapse. I'm just trying to learn about a lot of things I don't know anything about, as a way to totally get outside of myself.
Cool. I like the idea of what you're sharing about the glamorous writing life, is that you want to take a break, but you probably won't, because you're going to write about the end of the world. Like, that's totally writing. There you go, folks. So welcome to the glamorous life of writing. So thank you so much, Alyssa. And again, the anthology Shapes of Native Nonfiction is available from the University of Washington Press. And then White Magic comes out April 27th, 2021 from Tin House. So awesome. All right. Next then is Jake. Jake, I'm going to actually start with a really broad question / observation, and kind of then narrow down and focus on your work. So my first question is kind of about my own observation growing up in Arizona. I'm Hopi. So for those that don't know, Navajo Reservation or Nation, excuse me, is upper east and massive, spills into New Mexico, and the Hopi Res is a small dot in the middle. But traveling through the Navajo Nation has definitely been part of my childhood. And it's home to an endless list of exceptional literary talent. I kid you not, from Sharon Bitsu, Esther Berlin, Lucy Tapahanzo, I mean, just to name a few. So I've always been very thankful to be living and reading in the age I'm in, because the Dene are a major source of talented writers, poets, and artists. So in fact, in April of 2021, there's going to be the Dene Reader, an anthology of Navajo literature is a title, and it's coming out from the University of Arizona Press. And that includes, I believe, Jake's work. Is that right? Yeah, great. And then, so my question then for you, Jake, is what contributes to this literary force source from the Navajo Nation? I've always been trying to figure that out. And, from your perspective, what is it about the Navajo Nation and the Dene people that creates this literary force of talented writers? Any thoughts?
That is a really, really good question. And one I've also thought about as well, and one that I'm sure a lot of Diné scholars are currently working on right now is as trying to define, right, a Diné literary or Diné literature and what that looks like. For my graduate work at IAI, I also did a thing on Diné aesthetics and poetics about trying to, define what is happening with Diné authors and writers. I think to begin, I feel like the Navajo Nation, right, is a really privileged place as compared to other Native nations across the country and even across the world in regards to where we are currently at, right? So of course we're living within our ancestral homelands. A lot of our language is still intact, though of course the danger of losing language is ever present on a lot of minds, especially here in the Southwest. But I feel like even that type of circumstance is still a privileged place to be. So I feel like what this then can show us, right, is the power that Native languages and Native ancestral stories have on modern day storytelling, right? And I feel like that is the prominent through line through all of our Diné scholars and writers and authors, is that they're pulling and being informed by this language and this sort of long storytelling history that exists here on the Navajo.
Yeah, I mean, I've always scratched my head and just looking at the list of, again, the book title is called The Diné Reader, an Anthology of Navajo Literature, coming out April 2021. It's just outstanding. It's massive. And I was just recognizing, oh, there's a lot of Diné writers and poets. So it's glad to see you among them as well. So my next question then is your debut collection of poems titled Eyes Bottle Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers from Milkweed garnered tons of well-deserved attention and celebration, including winning the 2018 National Poetry Series, which, by the way, folks, Jake's collection was selected from 1,500 submissions, so kind of a cool thing. But my question then is about what advice can you give to emerging talent? Specifically, is there any wisdom that you can share with the next wave of Indigenous or Diné writers?
That is also a really good question. I feel like I'm not at a point where I can be offering advice. I feel like you have to, have a few years under your belt and be writing. But I guess my quote unquote advice, right, would be, especially for poets and emerging poets, would be to know when to listen and know when to not listen. Right. And listen being, right, know when to invest in a particular thing, a particular poet, poem, or person, right? And know to completely ignore, right, people. I feel like as I'm navigating this post-publication world, I'm beginning to understand that a lot of the heroes that we've sort of looked up to, especially me, a lot of the heroes I've sort of adorned with all my praises and sort of looked up to and thought were invincible are actually just poets themselves, right? And they are also unfamiliar, and that type of environment can definitely turn very bad really quickly, right? So I feel like understanding when to listen and when to not listen is definitely a huge advice that I would offer. And also another one would be to read as much poems as possible, right? Seek out poems wherever you can. And I feel like that was my way through the completion of the manuscript, completion of the book itself. And it's something that I've forgotten, definitely. I feel like post-publication, as I get tied down with all the stresses of life and doing everything else after, I've forgotten how to read, forgotten how to sit down with a book and really devour it. And I feel like that's then, impacting, that's actually why I haven't been able to write, is I'm not reading as much.
Well, those are two really great ideas. And for those listening, those are the first 2 free lessons of the Jake Skeets MFA program. So you got to pay for the rest, teasing. But it is correct. And I think it's a very Native upbringing thing of listening, speaking, and also when to listen. I think that's definitely, for me, for sure, I can say is part of my upbringing, especially interacting with elders and community members. So thanks for sharing. And then the last question is just similar to everyone else, is what's next for you? It sounds like you might be writing some a new collection.
I'd like to think I am. I think I'm at a point where I'm brave enough to say, oh, I think this is a collection. So I have a few poems under my belt that I've been slowly writing, and I feel like they're beginning to point toward a larger thing. And with Eyes Bottled Dark, it really didn't hit the ground running until I understood its arc. So I feel like that's hitting again, which I'm really excited about and trying to devote as much time to. But of course, everything else is happening. I'm also toying with the idea of an essay collection, actually, with the few essays that I've written and published, and a lot of the essays that I get asked about or asked if I'm interested in writing, I feel like are beginning to point again toward this kind of arc. And I feel like as a writer, as a young writer, I feel like that's maybe where my strength is understanding and knowing when to find the threads of things, right? And really borrowing it from a Dene Weaver's understanding, right? When they set up the loom, they first set up the loom, right? And they set up the warp, right? And I feel like writers maybe operate the same way. At least for me, I operate in a very project-based type of way. So I've definitely seen the inner workings of that. But it's still, of course, I'm very much emerging in that world as well. I have no clue on how to work prose at all. So I'm still very new and still just excited about the opportunity of that new frontier, that new field of prose, specifically the essay. I have a few minor projects, well, not minor, but projects that I'm working on the side as well, just to fill time in between. One is the loom poems, right? So I'm still going through that process, and I'm basically self-publishing those. I'm just putting those out there. I don't necessarily feel like sending them out. I want them to be accessible as much as possible. And then the other thing I'm working on is a project through Arizona State University. I was awarded a fellowship through them, and I'm in the process of visual work right now. So I don't want to say too much, but it involves mapping and involves specifically my essay, The Memory Field, and sort of expanding on that in a visual sense. So I'm really excited about that, and that should be coming out later this year.
Cool. That sounds awesome. I love those top secret projects where like, here, I can't tell you, but here's a little bit. Well, so they were really exciting. But, I think you also were mentioning, not committing to what you're doing yet, but then also you have to commit. And I think that's also part of the process of writing. It's like, I guess I'm doing this thing, but, that goes to say to you and to all of our readers tonight is we want more of your work, of course, at the right place, at the right time, take care of your needs first, and then go back at it. So with all that said, thanks so much, Jake. And then with all that said, just thank you, writers, for sharing your work. And as I wrap up, I just want to share a little bit about the series, We the Indigenous. It is a West Coast literary series highlighting Indigenous writers. We debuted on Indigenous Peoples Day in September 2020 and featured Seattle area writers such as Laura Day and Sasha LaPointe, among others. And then in March of 2021, we featured Portland area Indigenous writers. All of this was virtual, of course. So next we head to the Bay Area, followed by Los Angeles, and we're gonna wrap things up in the Phoenix area, my hometown, in autumn of 2021. And this work would not be possible without the financial support from the Indian Collective. So I wanted to just do a shout out for them. The Indian Collective is an Indigenous-led organization dedicated to building Indigenous power, and you can learn more about them at the letter N, letter D, letter N collective.org. So with all that said, I'm incredibly thankful again for Get Lit for hosting us for this special edition of We the Indigenous. So thank you, and I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, DA. Thank you to DA, Alyssa, Tiffany, and Jake for being with us tonight. And a special thanks to DA for helping to facilitate that conversation and giving us a chance to learn even more about these authors. That was really wonderful. For the audience at home, you can learn even more about the authors, find more events to attend, and donate to help support Get Lit by visiting getlitfestival.org. We hope to see you at some of our live evening events beginning tomorrow at 7 p.m. with Eco Poetry featuring Derek Sheffield and Ellen Bass. So thank you all again for tuning in. Good night, everybody.